Hi, hello. I have tea brewing, so I'll have to go grab that in a second, but I wanted to talk about all the books I read in the month of March. It was a really good reading month. I read 11 books, most of which were phenomenal, including 2 that were 5 out of 5 stars favorites. So I'm gonna go grab my tea and I'll be right back. I'm drinking a tea called Almond Sugar Cookie, which, yes, is as delicious as it sounds. Oh, it smells so good. What a delight. Okay, anyway, I started off the month finishing The It Girl by Ruth Ware. I listened to this on audiobook, and it's a classic contemporary murder mystery thriller type book with a sprinkling of dark academia vibes. So it's set in 2 parts, the past and the present. The past being when our main character Hannah is a freshman or first year, whatever they call them in the UK, at Oxford University, and her best friend slash roommate April gets murdered. Hence the slight dark academia vibes, you know, we're at Oxford. The present portion is set about 10 years on. Hannah has physically moved on with her life. She's pregnant, married, she lives in a new country, but she's never been able to emotionally move on from the murder of April because, hello, trauma. And all of these feelings, these questions get brought up again when the convicted killer dies in prison, still proclaiming his innocence and trying to appeal his case. So basically, yeah, we have the past leading up to the murder, and then 10 years later, an older Hannah trying to just piece together what happened back then, and was it really the guy who was convicted, or was it someone else? You know, it's a solid murder mystery. I'd say it was spun pretty well by Ruth Ware. It was my first Ruth Ware book, and while it wasn't anything particularly special, I did think it was a decent mystery. I thought the red herrings and little side characters, everyone seemed kind of suspicious. It was well put together. However, it didn't blow me away. It didn't shock me. I enjoyed the mystery and everything as it came together, or I guess came apart and revealed itself. But I mean, yeah, it's not something that's going to stick with me forever, but if you like mysteries, if you like thrillers, you'll probably like this. I will say it probably could have been a good 50 pages shorter, just because present day Hannah has a lot of doubts and anxieties, which understandable, but it gets in the way of her digging into the case. And I mean, when you're reading a book, a mystery, you want it to keep going, and when she keeps having to take steps back because she feels like maybe I shouldn't be doing this, it's, I don't know, it sort of just derails the plot. But yeah, overall, decent. If you like murder mysteries, you'll probably like it. And then we had a 5 out of 5 star read, unsurprisingly, The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. I am a huge Brandon Sanderson fan already, and I also just obviously love fantasy books, fantasy worlds, so it's no surprise that I think this is absolutely spectacular. I would almost describe this series as Brandon Sanderson's magnum opus. It is just so epic, and I don't even have words. If you are a fantasy lover, you need to read this. I would not hand this to you as your first introduction to fantasy, but if you are someone who already, loves the genre, what are you doing? Read this. And I've only read the first book. It's only the tip of the iceberg, right? This is a whole series. It's ongoing. I'm so excited. I'm so excited. Oh my god. I don't even really know how to explain this book, but essentially it is a complex, amazing fantasy world. Very much Brandon Sanderson's thing. He creates these amazing worlds with these super interesting, innovative, hard magic systems. And this is no different. I just realized you can see him. So we have 4 main characters in this, at least this first book. So one is an unwilling assassin who kills a king and throws this country into war. And this war is happening on this broken plate of land called the Shattered Plains. Very interesting stuff. Then we have Kaladin. Kaladin is having a rough time. He was trained as a surgeon growing up, but then had to become a soldier. And at the beginning of this book, he is a slave. Like I said, rough go of it. Wow, I almost cried a couple times reading this, and I am not a crier, so just keep a box of tissues with you. It is unbelievably epic, but also it's tough. Then we have Dalinar. Dalinar is one of the high princes of the kingdom whose king got assassinated. The king was actually his brother. He's at war, and he starts having these weird visions. Okay, in this world, there are these things called high storms, which are these crazy, powerful, destructive storms. And he suddenly starts having what he doesn't know, or if they're hallucinations, if they're actual magical visions. But when the storms come, he sees things. And they all seem to connect back to this book called, what else? The Way of Kings. And this is an ancient text. His brother, the king who was assassinated, his brother was obsessed with this book. And it discusses these knights called the Lost Knights, or the Knights Radiant, who used to defend the world from these horrible, awful events called the Desolations. But this was like eons ago. And Dalinar doesn't really know what to make of it. And then we also have Shallan. Shallan is trying to go become a scholar and become the ward of the princess. But here's the thing. She has some other motivations. She's actually going to steal a magical object from the princess in order to save her family. So very, very interesting stuff. There are so many mysteries. That's just like the bare bones. The barest of bones. There is so much to this book. I know it's intimidating. It's 1,000-something pages long, but it is so worth it. Every little detail, every character, their arcs, it's amazing. I only wish I could write something like this, right? I mean, this is, it's amazing. It's practically perfect. I love the characters, the magic, the world, all the different cultures and how they wind together. You gotta read it. Yeah, The Way of Kings is the best book I read this month. And then we have another very emotional book, The Warm Hands of Ghosts by Katherine Arden. Wow, what a title and what a book. This book made me feel so many things, and it just drew me in. Katherine Arden is already one of my favorite authors. I love her Winter Night trilogy. The way that she writes, it's not overly done. It's not this extensive purple prose, but it has this lyrical quality to it that just speaks to me. This book is set during World War I, and I wish more books were, because it's such an interesting time in history where we went from fighting with muskets and swords to suddenly having trench warfare, chemical weapons, planes, and we were flung from one era to the next just in the blink of an eye. We talk so much about World War II, rightfully so, but World War I deserves more because it is devastating. We follow a pair of siblings in this book from both of their perspectives. We have Laura and Freddie. Both are from Halifax, Canada. And Laura, at the beginning of the book, has been honorably discharged. She was a nurse at the front, was injured, and then sent home. But if you know history, there was a ship explosion in Halifax, and a lot of civilians died, including Laura's parents. So she is suddenly orphaned and reeling from the PTSD she has from being a nurse at the front. But then she gets a box of her brother Freddie's things saying he is missing in action and presumed dead. But it doesn't feel quite right, so she goes back to the front to try and figure out what really happened to her brother. And then of course we have Freddie's perspective. At the very beginning, he is trapped in a pillbox with a German soldier, and then they make their way out, but it's really emotional. It is obviously really sad. It's a book set during war. What do you expect? And Freddie ends up meeting this strange violinist on the front who may or may not be the devil himself. So yes, that's all I'm gonna say. It is this mysterious, almost fairy tale-like book. I mean, it is very, very sad. It really did something for me. I don't even really know how to explain it. But my God, just Katherine Arden really plays with the themes of this war being almost like this biblical apocalypse. She literally wrote in her author's note, which by the way, the author's note is incredible. She wrote, "I too considered the war through an apocalyptic lens, and in doing so, I kept returning to this biblical quote. And I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away. The question I would have asked this long ago prophet is, did you see a new hell too? Because humanity did." Like, that is what this book is about, okay? And it's kind of ghostly, and there's little weird kind of magical realism things going on in the most beautiful way. I know that there are certain things in this book that aren't perfect. For example, there is a romance that, you know, of course it isn't the main focus of the book, so it takes a backseat. I'm fine with that. Do I think it would have been a little bit better, a little bit more believable had there been a bit more lead up? Sure. But overall, I just love this so much, and I thought it was so good. In my heart, it's a 5-star book. It is absolutely amazing, and if you are even just vaguely interested in that premise, read it. Okay, then we had a few audiobooks in a row. I read Stone Blind by Natalie Haynes, and wow, I have not had a good track record this year with Greek mythological retellings. I was disappointed in this one, which is such a shame because I was really looking forward to it. Look at this cover, the title, the synopsis. Tell me what you think it's about. Because I thought it was a story from Medusa's perspective, the likes of Circe, where we're really diving into her tale, her perspective on it. And that's kind of true, but not really. Medusa is one of the many perspectives in this book, and we have a million other stories happening at once. Of course, a lot of the Greek historical and mythological events are interconnected. So Natalie Haynes tries to tackle basically all of them that surround Medusa's story. So the founding of Athens, the birth of Athena, Perseus, like, it's too much, in my opinion. She tried to do too much. There isn't enough focus with the story. So we get Medusa's perspective, but it's maybe a fifth tops of the book. And honestly just left me wanting more. I liked the way she wrote it. It was quick-witted, it was smart, it was funny. I would actually love an anthology of just the Greek myths retold in her style. There's one passage where the founding of Athens is told from the perspective of the olive trees. I found that to be quite interesting. So yeah, there are bits and pieces that I really enjoyed, but I think it did lack a focus and a point of view to make an impact. Also, she was a little bit strong-handed in the message she was trying to send, in the way that where it got sort of repetitive and you're literally telling the reader what to think about certain characters and events. I don't really like that. Leave it up to interpretation. If you show it and spell it out well enough, people are going to come to their conclusions naturally without having it laid out for them word for word. I mean, I'm not unhappy I read it, but I'm not impressed. All right, then we had The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches. This is a cute, cozy fantasy romance about witches in England. Our main character, Mika, was born in India and then raised by like governesses and nannies in England, because every witch who was born, her parents die. So they're all orphans. And our head witch, Primrose, she thinks it best that witches don't really keep in contact with each other to protect themselves, and they just have a every 3-month sort of little meeting, and that's it. They have to live their lives independently otherwise. It's quite a lonely existence. But then Mika gets a strange invitation to become a teacher to 3 young witches who are living at this seaside house being raised together. Quite unusual, and yeah, there is like a little romance. It's just a little found family, cute, cozy read. I mean, it's heartwarming to the core. It's this little cottage witch making potions, doing spells type of witchy book. I mean, yeah, is it going to be the most innovative, hardcore fantasy book in the world? No. Is the plot pretty predictable and obvious? Yes, but that's not really the point of the book. It's supposed to be about the characters, and it's sweet, it's fun, it's highly enjoyable. If that sounds like a good time to you, you will love this. Okay, then we had All That Consumes Us by Erica Waters. This is a YA dark academia gothic novel. I would more so say it's gothic rather than dark academia. It leans very much into the sort of ghosts, occult type secret club thing at a college rather than just like a murdery secret history type story. I did really enjoy the vibes and the ambiance of this. A gothic setting will always get to me, and I do love secret societies that are meddling with things they should not be messing with. However, I do think this book had some pacing issues. I was over 40% of the way through, and we still hadn't gotten into the meat of the story, you know, the actual ghostly plot, the magic stuff that's going on. And I just don't think the introduction, the lead up, needed to last that long. And then on the other hand, the ending I felt was a bit rushed. I would have preferred it to be drawn out a little bit longer. Some of the secrets and details about this society and what they were doing, I wish had been revealed a little bit more, talked about a bit more. But ultimately, I thought it was a good story. I liked the plot. I enjoyed the characters. Yes, the main character, Tara, is a little bit annoying. And I think ultimately that's because the book, being YA, it does read a little bit on the juvenile side. They're all college kids, but they read young. If you want a little gothic, kind of dark academia novel, go for it. I liked it. I didn't love it, but I thought it was worth reading.
On the bottom, Paige, you were good. I'm waiting for you to be great.
And then I read Emily Wilde's Encyclopaedia of Faeries. Everyone loves this book. They're correct. It is so good. This is just the coziest, most fairy tale-like book ever. This follows who else? Emily Wilde, who is a Cambridge professor studying dryadology. In this world, they know fairies exist, and it is a valid field of academic research. So she goes off to this little village on an island on the Arctic Circle to study their folk. And then her sort of frenemy colleague, Bamblebee, he shows up, and he is this like dramatic, chaotic Howl from Howl's Moving Castle character.
I give up. I see no point in living if I can't be beautiful.
That I just love. And they get up to so many shenanigans. This really reads like a fairy tale. I took a class on Russian folklore and fairy tales in college because it fulfilled a requirement and I wanted to. It was so interesting. This really does read like one of those fairy tales. And I love that. If you love that kind of storytelling where it's just whimsical and magical and things are happening and it's very adventurous, you'll enjoy this. Of course, there's a fun, cozy romance, and I loved the descriptions of this village, this land on the Arctic Circle. It was so beautifully described, especially because I went to Iceland for the first time in September, and I felt like I just could really visualize this place based on, you know, my own travels. I don't even know. It's cozy, it's cute, it's fun, and I actually just really like the lore and the plot. This is fairies as fairies should be. None of those elf-like Sarah J. Maas fairies. These are like proper fairy tale fairies, and I think everyone honestly would love this book. It is so good. Then we had another audiobook. It was Happy Place by Emily Henry, my second Emily Henry book. I read Beach Read last year and I wasn't blown away. I thought it was fine. Happy Place was much better. I really enjoyed this. It was heartfelt, and at some points, because we delved so much into each character and their motivations, that it almost felt like it was sort of literary, like a literary fiction instead of just a romance. This follows our main character Harriet, who is a resident training to become a surgeon, and she had just recently broken up with her long-time college boyfriend, Win, but they hadn't told their close-knit group of friends yet. because they felt like it was going to break up everybody. And they're forced together on their annual trip to the beach house that the friends all take, and because of the strange circumstances, they decide they have to pretend they're still together. But I was thoroughly invested in the characters in this book as well as the setting. It's this Maine summer beach town setting. I love Maine. I live in New England, so I was eating that up. I could really relate to Harriet. She felt like such a distinctive character to me. She's such a people pleaser. She's a peacemaker, and she's sort of crippled by anxiety and the weight of other people's expectations. And Win is just like a sweet guy. Like I rooted for it. I supported it. There's a lot of friendship stuff going down, you know, flashbacks to them in college. It was so sweet. The only complaint I have is one of the major reasons for the breakup wasn't revealed until later. And I thought that was to the detriment of the book, because I feel like things would have made more sense if we had known that sooner. There wasn't really a reason to keep that hidden. And then there was another thing where Harriet had gotten really into pottery after the breakup, but then it's brought up as this major part of her and sort of her personality, I think over halfway through the book. I don't understand why this wasn't brought up earlier and incorporated from the very start, because it does end up playing a pretty big part in their story. I mean, overall, if you like romances, even if you don't, because I'm not a huge romance reader, I thought it was a good book. I enjoyed exploring this relationship between the two main characters and their friend group. It was a good time. I'm gonna cover up my library there, but I didn't mean to read 2 Emily Henry books this month, but the audiobook of Happy Place was available sooner than I expected it to be, so I just read both. And I don't even know which one I like better. I think I would rank them so far. Probably Book Lovers is my favorite, then Happy Place, and then Beach Read. I think Book Lovers and Happy Place were far better. It's a cute story following 2 people who love books, Nora and Charlie. Charlie is an editor, Nora is a book agent. I thought this book was fun because it turned a cheesy classic Hallmark story sort of on its head. You know those Hallmark movies where, you know, the main character goes off to a small little town and they're from the big city and they're all jaded and they're addicted to their job, but then they fall in love and learn to just fit in with this quaint little small town life and leave their terrible big city life and big city girlfriend or boyfriend behind. Yeah, this is kind of that story, except Nora, our main character, is that big city girlfriend who gets left behind. She's literally been broken up with by like 4 guys who have gone to small towns, fallen in love, and left her. So she thinks she's cursed. It's so funny. So then her younger sister decides that she wants Nora to have that kind of love story. She whisks Nora off with her to this little tiny town in North Carolina, and they have this whole like bucket list of things they need to do. Nora's just kind of going along with it because she wants to support her sister. She feels like they haven't been very close lately, and she has a very close relationship with her sister usually. So it's very much about a sibling relationship as much as a romance, because yes, Charlie, the book editor, turns out he's from this small town and a romance begins. It's just super cute. Again, kind of like Happy Place, Emily Henry really just dove into the characters, their motivations, and their stories, you know, like their personal faults and fears that caused them to act the way they do. The way that she writes characters, I really enjoy. I feel like they feel really real. I mean, overall, yeah, I will probably read some other Emily Henry books because 2 for 2 this month, and I'm not a romance reader, so. And then I read The Parable of the Sower by Octavia E. Butler for my book club, which this was the first pick for the first meeting I ever went to. I honestly don't know if I ever would have read this book otherwise. It was written in the 90s, but it actually starts off in the year 2024 as a dystopian science fiction novel. And I liked it. I really did. I thought it was interesting and it was ahead of its time, but man, was it bleak. I love a sad story, a dark story, but this was sort of a struggle for me just because it is so kind of realistic and deeply disturbing. I would say trigger warning for basically anything for this book, like drug abuse, SA, like really, really trigger warning for SA, child abuse, like just murder, animal cruelty.
That's rough, buddy.
Just any terrible thing. It's mentioned in this book. We follow our main character Lauren, who lives in this neighborhood walled off society with her family, and she has a condition called hyperempathy where she can literally feel other people's emotional and physical, well, feelings and pain. She has to hide this because this world is really dangerous. They live in this walled off community because the US has essentially fallen into disarray. Water and food cost thousands. People don't really go to school and get an education anymore. There are just, oh my god, there's so much crime, murder. It's terrible. I mean, this is really tough to read. The other major plot line is that Lauren founds, or as she says, sort of discovers a religion she calls Earthseed, based on the idea that God is change. It's really based sort of in some other concepts from other religions, but also just naturalism. Honestly, it was really fleshed out and interesting. It wasn't my favorite thing just because like I'm not super interested in reading sort of someone becoming a prophet or like founding a religion, but it tied together the themes of the book and also left a little bit of hope in an otherwise bleak story. I mean, I don't know if I can say I enjoyed reading it, but I'm glad I read it, if that makes any sense. Lastly, I read Iron Flame by Rebecca Yarros. This is the sequel to Fourth Wing, and listen, I don't know what it is about this series that I love, because objectively, there's a lot of flaws. I'm aware of them. Like, the world building is iffy at best. The writing is cringeworthy many times. There is quite literally a scene where Xaden, the like male love interest, tells Violet that they're endgame. That took me right out. That was so bad. I'm aware and I understand that this series just isn't technically that good. It's not that original. It relies a lot on tropes, and you can tell it's this author's first fantasy. But I just really enjoy these. I don't know. I ate the first and second book up. I had such a fun time. I love the dragons. I love the characters. I do think while the magic system isn't like built out very well, I wish things were explained better. Just the concept that the characters are developing magical abilities by being connected or bonded to a dragon, I think that's cool. I don't know. Objectively, not great. But in my heart, I have so much fun reading these. It's like eating popcorn. I also am not sure exactly how I feel about the ending of this book. I liked the big final battle stuff. I'm the sucker for that. But there was an event, if you've read this book, a cliffhanger event, I don't know if I like. Just because I don't think I'm all that interested in seeing that plot line explored in the third book. We'll see. I mean, I'm gonna read it because despite all the flaws I've mentioned, I really like this series. Anyway, those are all of the 11 books I read in the month of March. I hope I got through that quickly enough. I'm gonna go have a snack and probably read some more. But yeah, favorite books were by far The Way of Kings and The Warm Hands of Ghosts. Those were amazing, amazing, amazing. So yeah, let me know what you read in the month of March and what you liked or didn't like.